I think there's always an opportunity for us to learn and grow. So continuously reading articles, studies, having a curious mindset, I think in this neurodiversity space is a great thing to have. We don't know what we don't know.
Exude Human Capital Consulting hosts Hold On, Let Me Close My Door, bringing real stories from real professionals with real solutions to you. Join us as we navigate the ever-changing workplace with Alison DiFlorio, co-founder and managing partner of Exude Human Capital, and special guests. Welcome to episode 3 of Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. This is Alison DiFlorio, and I'm either going to welcome you because it's the first time you're listening to the podcast or welcome you back. For those of you who have been with us before, you know that this podcast is designed to speak with real HR professionals and executives and leaders and people from all levels of organizations to tell the real stories of what happens behind those closed doors. This podcast is launching in April, and April is Autism Awareness Month. So to honor the month and to create some awareness, we thought it would be fantastic to spend some time talking about neurodiversity in the workplace, to understand what it is, and most importantly, how employers are thinking about neurodiversity and what steps they're taking to implement strategies and processes to support neurodivergent employees in the workplace. And I'm so incredibly honored today to have with me one of my colleagues, one of our senior human resources consultants at Exude Human Capital, RoMaine Jones-Wise, otherwise known as Ro. Welcome, Ro.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here today.
Yeah, Ro, I think we've been talking about doing a podcast together for over a year now. So this is a special day, I think, for both of us that we actually get to spend some time together. And Ro, you and I have had an opportunity to present on this topic before. So I know you've got a lot of really interesting insights to share with our audience today. Before we get started, I'd love for you to share a little bit about you, your background, and your experience in this neurodiversity space.
Sure. So I've been a human resources professional now for 20 plus years. Cannot believe I'm saying that, but very proud of that accomplishment. I've worked in various industries, including education, hospitality, gaming, home care, healthcare, manufacturing, and I've enjoyed the progressive career that I've had and the opportunity to be a thought partner and trusted advisor to executives, CEOs, and really bring a different perspective to the workplaces that I encounter. On a personal note, I am someone with a diagnosed neurodiversity. I have dyslexia, so I have a challenging time with numbers and letters, and I was never comfortable sharing that insight, but in recent years, I found that because of the heightened awareness, there's a safe space to share that. So my perspective is coming from someone who wants to offer personal insight and also an awareness method to bring accessibility to individuals with similar conditions to myself, both known and unknown. So I am very excited to be here today to have this conversation.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's the first time I've learned of that as well. So I appreciate you adding that to the conversation today. I think before we actually get into our conversation, I'd love to just spend a minute or two setting some context for the conversation. There's a lot of research out there that suggests that about 15 to 20% of the U.S. population is what we would refer to as neurodiverse. And we're defining neurodiversity as including conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia that Ro just described, PTSD, and other learning differences that people may experience. Neurodiversity itself is defined as the natural way that people think and learn and perceive the world, how they interact with others, and how they process information. And what we also know from the research, which is really concerning, is that there are higher levels of unemployment or underemployment among the neurodiverse. The research suggests that neurodiverse individuals are highly valuable talent with strengths in areas like innovation and creativity, technical design, high levels of concentration, reliability, persistence, and much of the report focuses of the recent report that I reviewed. It focuses on having a keen accuracy and ability to detect errors. Now, that said, that's a lot of strengths that someone brings to the workplace. There's so many barriers that exist because when we think about the opposite of neurodiversity, which would be neurotypical, HR practices, work practices are generally developed by and for people who identify as neurotypical. So if we think of things like our recruiting process, our selection process, our performance review process, even how we design office space and workplace structures, it's generally designed for the neurotypical. So, Ro, with that in mind, I'm sure there's plenty you want to share with us about what employers can be doing or thinking about differently. But let's just start off with a general question. Why should employers be aware of neurodiversity in the workplace?
Well, I think it's important to have a level of awareness because it causes us to have to adjust the way we do things. As you stated, a lot of our standard practices and procedures and policies are developed by people who would identify as neurotypical. With the awareness comes the adjustments in how we communicate, how we're delivering messaging, how we are being inclusive around the space of performance management, engagement, a sense of belonging in the workplace. Because as I stated to you, it was never something I was personally comfortable sharing until I got to a place where I felt like the value that I add to the organization outweighs what my diagnosis is. So it's creating this space for those conversations to happen and to afford leaders within organizations the tools to make the adjustments to accommodate everybody on their workforce.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if you were able to attend the Philly SHRM conference in the last couple of weeks, but I was able to attend a session there on neurodiversity. And there were a few Philadelphia employers that were there speaking about some of the actions that they've been taking to create what they refer to as universal access to the neurodiverse. I'd be curious from your experience, you support so many different clients. What can employers do to be prepared to attract and retain neurodiverse talent?
So when talking about attracting or retaining talent, employers really want to look at their full life cycle of recruitment. How are we writing job descriptions? Where are we posting opportunities? How are we giving access to applying for roles? Are we making sure that systems are accessible for individuals? A big focus area I personally have found to be around the interview process, making sure there are different types of interviews established in a standard recruiting process because not everyone has the same level of comfort or sociability. And that may resonate in an interview with someone who you might not feel is the ideal candidate for a role because they're socially uncomfortable in an interview setting. So having different methods of communication, be it online, in person, over the phone, video, something to accommodate the different style and comfort levels of individuals so that you really get to know the person. Another thing employers may consider is taking out the formality of the interview. At the end of the day, a job interview is really about a conversation. So how can we equip the conversation to be readily accessible to both parties, and making sure that the individuals that are offering the interviews from the employer side are properly trained and have the awareness to what to look for in terms of social cues, body language, inattentiveness, if there's some reservations in answering certain questions, how to navigate those scenarios to make it more comfortable for both parties involved.
And that's those are all really helpful tips. One of the things that I have been observing that employers are doing more of is being very clear on what their interview process is going to be, posting the actual steps. And you mentioned giving options to how someone might be interviewed. Can you talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that and what you're seeing in the workplace?
What I've seen, and a lot of this has transpired, post pandemic, as we all kind of created this virtual world to do work. But equipping applicants or candidates for roles with the steps in the interview process is very helpful because people know how to prepare. But giving them direct insight on who they'll have conversations with, possible lengths of interviews, if they're going to be multiple people present, is also very important. So a lot of organizations have moved to a panel interview process. And I want you all to think about this for a second. If you walked into a room and you were being interviewed by 5 people without any advance notice, how would you feel? Giving that information up front to someone is going to help them prepare, both neurodiverse or neurotypical, to kind of sit in front of an audience of 5 individuals and be asked multiple questions at the same time. So I think making sure all of the details of the interview process are spelled out in advance and then followed as they are described. So not deviating from that, following the set plan that's been in place. I think that is what would be most helpful for individuals.
I think I just had a mild panic attack thinking about I would be walking into an interview, unexpectedly seeing 5 people there. So thank you for that. I certainly think there's opportunity there. One of the takeaways that I thought was that's worth sharing, that I heard from a gentleman from Parkway Corporation with regards to adjusting the interview process. He was referencing that his organization is doing a pilot. So rather than saying, effective tomorrow, we're changing the interview process, they're actually launching it for a period of time with some of the things that you just spoke about, right? Giving information in advance, giving a clear step-by-step outline of the actual process. And they're going to review the applicant's experience, the candidate's experience, the managers, the hiring manager's experience at the end of the pilot to make tweaks or recommendations and fine-tune the process before they take it company-wide. Have you seen any organizations running pilots with recruiting or any other area of human resources in order to try out new strategies?
I can speak to my time in hospitality and gaming. I had the pleasure of working for what is formerly known as Sugar House Casino, and our interview process was very atypical. For any position at the casino, you were required to come and do what was known as a panel interview. However, this panel was probably yourself and about 15 other candidates. And it was a fun, interactive video to allow personality to show through, because as a customer service industry, we wanted to make sure we were giving our guests this wonderful guest experience and having people that had a passion for people pleasing and customer service. The challenge with that became for individuals who did not have the social comfort level of talking about themselves and kind of asking on the spot questions that weren't job related technically. there was really sometimes some disconnects, and we had to reevaluate how we were assessing individuals in this process based on the roles that they were applying for. So if you were applying for a position in the back of the house, did you really have to have that bubbly enthusiasm, guest service passion, or was it more about the ability to have the skills, knowledge, and ability to do the job? So there were some times where we would reevaluate the process for what positions we invited to panel based on what the job detailed. So we adjusted sometimes based on the roles that were being applied for, and making sure that we were giving everyone an equitable access to opportunities at the casino.
That's a great example. And you made me think of something else as well. And this came up in the presentation I heard a couple of weeks ago around job design and thinking about rethinking job design where you can on rather how something gets done to focusing on what needs to get done and allowing flexibility in how something gets done as it relates to the neurodiverse employees. And the example that was given, there was a call center example given where a particular employee who identified as neurodiverse was in a very open space environment with a lot of noise, a lot of distractions. And it was becoming challenging for that individual to actually do his job, for him to be able to focus. So he would leave and go to a quieter part, which was not part of the job, and was, I won't use the word being reprimanded, but was being asked to go back to the regular pool, at which point he finally shared that it was distracting, or one manager recognized that perhaps this is worth a conversation to find out, what is it about your job that stresses you? And the conversation led to the fact that I can't focus on listening or doing my job when I'm hearing all of these other conversations. So as a result of that conversation, they were able to adjust how he did his work and give him the option of wearing noise canceling headphones and to be able to work in a place where he didn't see as many people, so it wasn't as distracting. Can you talk a little bit about job design and your thoughts on where you've seen it adjusted to support individuals?
I have seen it adjusted with several engagements with clients, both in my Exude life and in my previous life. But I think that question that you just sparked is one we all want to put down in our HR toolkit or our leader toolkit and ask our team members, what is stressing you about the job? That is going to open up a lot of conversation and give us insight into the experiences that we're each having. But in my previous life and in my current life, I've seen job design come up in a way that has allowed people the flexibility to achieve the goals, not do it the status quo way that has always been done. So sometimes we are just kind of replicating what has happened in the past, looking at job descriptions. When someone leaves an organization, we will just repost it without really examining what needs to happen. But recently, I've seen leaders take a pause and really assess, okay, what are the key fundamentals that we need to achieve with this role? Does it matter where this person sits? Does this person have to come to the office every day? Can this person have a asynchronous schedule as long as they're meeting their deliverables? You know, does this person need to have daily meetings or weekly meetings? Because that can be overload for some individuals. Constant contact for individuals that may have neurodiverse conditions is definitely a deterrent sometimes, because it's like, okay, there's a heightened level of anxiety. I have to be around people. I have to answer questions. But when we think about how often we communicate with one another and what is required to achieve success in a job, then we can design it so that it is given the best experience for not only the person doing the job, but also the person that is supervising and leading that individual. Because now they know how to best manage and equip that person for success. So really taking the time to figure out what needs to happen, and figuring out if the how is as important as we make.
I think that's really great advice. I guess one follow-up question I have there, what do you say to the manager who says, well, I don't have time to redesign a job?
I would say to the manager, if you don't have time to redesign the job, will you have time to re-recruit in 3 months?
Oh, I love that, Ro. That was that's putting it very succinctly.
Very succinctly. We take the time. Time is an investment. We think about it that way. If we invest the time up front, we'll have a better return on investment in the outcome. So if we just go with what we've done in the past, really not evaluating or reassessing and just kind of replicating, we're going to find ourselves in the same situation 3 months, 6 months, a year from now, versus taking the time, really reassessing the job, designing it appropriately for the role, and then finding the talent that can achieve that. In doing so, you're going to find somebody that is going to have a better sense of belonging in that role. They're going to have a better experience, which is going to give you longevity so that you're not going back to the recruitment board every 6 months or so.
Interesting. Now, I want to talk about one other area before we leave this particular topic, and that's around performance management. In the work that we do, we often get called upon when there are performance-related issues or an employer is looking for guidance on how to handle a particular performance-related issue. And in some cases, once you actually determine what the root cause is, it may be that there is some sort of neurodivergent condition that is impacting someone's ability to do their job. And there are remedies or steps that an employer can take to try to help that individual to turn their performance around. I'd love to hear from you if you've seen anything like that, or if you have advice for our listeners on how they can think about performance management a little bit differently.
I actually haven't. I have a really great success story, and not to call anyone out particularly, I'll give a generalization of this success story. I was working with a client over the last year, and they were having performance issues with a leader within the organization, and the executive director was calling me to get guidance on how to help remedy this what she felt was a lack of communication or responsiveness from this individual. And we went through the process. We tried to have meetings, and then there was this safe space that finally happened where the employee let us know that there was a neurodivergence. And when we found that out, then it really changed the mindset of, okay, how can we support this employee? And we found tools and remedies and spent some dedicated time helping this individual organize their email, figuring out how to manage the calendar better, carving out time for communications on a daily basis, and creating a daily schedule of activities, because this person thrived in a space where there had to be like a process to follow. In doing so, we were able to turn around the entire performance experience that was being had, because this person was not able to process all of the multiple priorities at once, respond to emails, respond to calendar invites, get back to phone calls, all succinctly, where the executive director was very comfortable at managing all of those multiple tasks at one time, and just felt that everybody should be able to do it the same way that she did, because that's how she worked. And it was really bringing awareness to the fact that not everybody works that way, and how can we adjust and give tools and resources to support people where they are so that they can achieve success in their roles. And in doing so, I think it really becomes asking those questions of our employees. What is stressing you out about your job? When people answer that question, you're going to find out those things that really cause friction in the workplace. And 9 times out of 10, if we're proactively resolving those, then we're going to have less performance issues. The challenge
And
is right now we're not having the conversation, so things escalate to the point where it becomes a disciplinary action for some leaders versus us having conversation and proactively offering support or resources if necessary.
that's a great example. And thanks for sharing that. It really points out the importance of having the conversation, which leads me to my next question for you. If that's the case, I can imagine being in the shoes of a manager thinking, I'm not comfortable asking that question because what if they share with me something that I'm not prepared to address or I don't know what to do? So, what can employers be doing to prepare their managers for effectively managing neurodiversity across their team?
I think there's always an opportunity for us to learn and grow. So continuously reading articles, studies, having a curious mindset, I think in this neurodiversity space is a great thing to have. We don't know what we don't know, but we're responsible for learning. So we have to take the initiative to want to learn because just sheer ignorance is not an excuse anymore. We have to be able to evolve as society evolves. So taking on this curious mindset, having, time for professional development, reading articles, attending webinars, reaching out to human capital consultants to be a resource or thought partner, things like that are definitely ways that we can equip managers for success, and just really understanding that at the end of the day, it's about treating people with respect and dignity. And if we don't know an answer in the moment, it's okay to say we don't know, but we're going to go find out how we can support to make sure that we're giving everybody the best employment experience.
I love that. You just made me think of something that I want to share with our listeners. There is, and certainly these are for listeners that are in the greater Philadelphia area. However, all metropolitan areas have some group that's similar to the one I'm going to share with you now. The one in our area is called Neurodiversity Employment Network, and it's really a central hub of activities and resources for employers and employees who identify with neurodivergent conditions. It's a fantastic resource to find all kinds of tools, connections, organizations in your community that can supply coaching, job aids, and other support for your managers and for your team. But make sure you check that out. That's the Neurodiversity Employment Network. Ro, before we wrap this up today, I'd love for you to share, I hate to say the one best piece of advice for employers, but what are the few best pieces of advice for employers who really want to make their workplace a more inclusive place for a neurodivergent population?
I think my first piece of advice is to be welcoming of the opportunity. Walk into this awareness with the idea of really getting to learn more about your colleagues, learning more about yourself, because this is only going to heighten your social awareness. It's going to heighten our empathy for one another, and it's going to heighten our emotional intelligence. So I think welcoming the opportunity and really opening up that safe space to have these conversations, to really rethink how we look at employment, performance, succession planning, really step away from the status quo of what we've done and really figure out what can we do differently. I think what can we do differently is always my favorite question. How can we evolve? How can we get better? And really opening ourselves up, broadening the view of what a successful candidate looks like. If there's been a profile that has been repeated in a certain role, maybe we need to change our mindset a little bit and figure out how can success look going forward. So really rethinking that, invest in the proper training for your team. Let's really put the investment in making sure people leaders are equipped to handle unconscious bias, cultural competency, making sure that we are no longer looking for the cultural fit for organizations. I think that's the one phrase I hope that we can leave in 2022. I want someone that's a cultural fit. What does that mean? That we're all alike? No, we want someone that's going to add to the culture of the organization. What can someone else bring in that's going to make us all better? Because that's what happens when we invite in differences. We learn about each other and we all grow collectively. So we're better together. And the differences are what makes us unique.
I think that's great. RoMaine Jones-Wise of Exude Human Capital, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and some suggestions and ideas for what employers can be doing more of, less of, or differently to build a more inclusive workplace. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. Until next time.